Now, there are a handful of weapons in Fallout New Vegas that you encounter in pretty much every playthrough. There's the 357 Magnum, the 9mm pistol, the laser pistol, varmint rifle, and dynamite. Now, all these weapons have their pros and cons, but the general consensus for these guns is that you're supposed to trade them out for a much better alternative later on in the game. Here's the thing, I don't want to do that, so today I'm going to be beating the game with dynamite. Now, I chose dynamite because I figured it was the weakest of the bunch, seeing as it's a lot rarer, and even though, yes, it does a lot of damage and makes good crowd control, in the end of the day, that won't stick through the entire playthrough, and eventually I'm going to start missing out on damage. Now, before I start the run, I want to cover a few rules, like I'm allowed to use variants of dynamite such as powder charges and long fuse dynamite. Now, you may be questioning why I can use powder chargers, but put simply, the game makes it pretty clear that powder charges are actually made out of dynamite, so I think they're fair game. Jumping ahead a bit, I only used both of those variants once. So first things first, I'm going to stop using my show voice, because to be frank, I have a lot to go through, and if I continue doing that, I would hurt my throat. Nothing too special for my character this time, just an exceptionally stupid name, and well, I accidentally turned my hair blue for some reason. For my special stats, I focus primarily on perception and intelligence, perception for a better explosive skill, and intelligence for, well, intelligence. I made sure to drain luck and charisma because I figured I'd need the points more in endurance and agility. Endurance so I could survive getting my limbs blown off every couple seconds, and agility so I could hopefully get more sneak pickpocketing in. I'll tell you right now, agility was a waste. For my traits, I took Kamikaze and Loose Cannon. Kamikaze because I figured the extra action points would really come in handy, especially since the only way I could reliably throw the dynamite without killing everyone and everything, I would need VATS. I took Loose Cannon because it's literally the only trait that has anything to do with explosives, so I figured it'd be useful. After I left the doctor's house, I immediately went to Chet because, well, he might have explosives for me. He did, and I was able to buy an extra 4 sticks of dynamite. Since I tagged the explosive skill, I already had 3 on me, so this brought my grand total up to 7. Now 7 doesn't sound like a lot of dynamite, but it's plenty when it comes to taking down powder gangers. Joe Cobb was the first victim of many, and I actually had to have 2 rounds with him. In my first attempt, I learned that throwing the dynamite point blank range would have resulted in my immediate death. In my second, I found out that the dynamite was extremely weak and wasn't even enough to kill Joe. Instead, it took a whopping 2 sticks of dynamite to take him out, but I wasn't feeling too bad as he had a couple in his inventory. For the Ghost Town gunfight, I wasn't actually able to recruit that many people, except Easy Pete because obviously I have explosives tagged. This came in handy because he gave me a whopping 5 dynamite, which I was able to put to use immediately, as it was more than enough to take out the powder gangers. The gangers themselves were wielding dynamite, so that meant I was able to take a few of them back from them, bringing my total up to a whopping 28 sticks of dynamite. Before I left Good Springs, I made sure to put a stick of dynamite down Easy Pete's pants, because the Mojave can only handle one dynamite crazy maniac. This was a mistake because this made Victor fly immediately into a rage like some sort of deranged monkey alien because his friend died. Victor then started flying around the map, and I'm not kidding, he was literally flying, which was so terrifying that I ran straight into the loving embrace of a rad scorpion. Ignoring the fact my little accident caused me to go all the way back to the beginning of a Ghost Town gunfight quest, I made my way to Prim not because it was close by, but more so because the convicts can also carry dynamite. This I figured would make them a prime target, so I went inside the Bison Steve Motel and began clearing it out. Here's the thing, I was right. They were in fact ideal targets as I could take out multiple of them with a single stick of dynamite, and they all tended to carry 1 or 2 sticks on them. When I got to Deputy Beagle's room, I just killed him because by now my leather armor was starting to run out of durability, and I figured his would make a suitable replacement. Before I left Prim, I made sure to reprogram Prim Slim, because A, I could, and B, he's awesome. After Prim, like clockwork, I made my way to the Mojave Outpost, where I did quests for the Rangers. Ranger Jackson is as easy as ever, as the ants don't have any particular strengths against explosives. For Ranger Ghosts, I just went to Nipton and killed Volpes. I did not need to, and all this really did was get me in the Legion's bad books, but sadly I enjoyed this too much to really care. I decided while I was here I might as well take the booted quest as I figured I could use the experience, and so I made my way to the Legion raiding camp. On my way there, my past transgressions had caught up with me, as a band of Legion assassins were now here for my cheekbones. Unfortunately for me, they decided they did not want to play fair today, and started glitching around teleporting in VATS. This made it impossible for me to hit them with dynamite, and since I was in VATS I couldn't actually fight back as they proceeded to clobber me. Reloading my game seemed to fix their ping issues, as they were actually abiding by the laws of physics this time, and I was able to take them down with the dynamite. It took a lot of dynamite, but honestly it was worth it since one of them was carrying a super sledge, and that carried enough caps inside of it that I could probably buy 10 times the dynamite that I spent. It seems like my reputation exceeds me in more ways than one, seeing as when I got to the Legion camp, all the Legionaries ran from me. I'm genuinely not sure what caused this, but it made it a lot easier for me, as I didn't blow up the powder gangers or have to waste too much dynamite. The reason I went through so much trouble just to save those random powder gangers was because if things flew south when it came to me getting dynamite, I could always go to the NCRF and earn enough reputation with them where they'll give me free dynamite. Anyways, back to the game, I figured now I had enough XP and levels that I could actually make my way to the strip and not die immediately, so I did. The road there was fairly basic. The only thing that I really did different from all my other runs was that I stopped by Sloan to heal Snuffles. I had a high enough medicine stat, so why wouldn't I? I have long since learned that the Black Mountain shortcut is way better than my old way of just running through the Deathclaws, so I decided to take that way this time, and I did not get my limbs ripped off for once in my life. As soon as I got to the strip, I just decided to deal with Benny right away, as there's no such thing as too much XP. To be fair to Benny, he took a pretty ridiculous amount of dynamite to go down, while the other chairman only took about 1, he took 7. Now that is a fair amount of dynamite, but like I said, I have plenty in the reserves right now, so I ended up just throwing as many as I could at him and hoping it would kill him. This worked, seeing as dynamite has a fairly big blast radius, so I scooped out his life savings and made my way to the NCR embassy. I decided to side with the NCR this time, as I have yet to commit unspeakable crimes to their people. The first step for the NCR is to, of course, recruit the boomers, so I ran to Nellis to go do that. When I got to Nellis, I used one of my bite-sized pieces of death on George, which caused a blast so big that it broke the game. Aside from that, working with the boomers went surprisingly smooth, which was weird as it started with me almost getting ripped to pieces by their artillery. In a shocking twist, I didn't use a single piece of dynamite while I was working with the boomers, because if I did, it would probably just lead to my death. The only place I really would need dynamite was when I was fighting the ants, but since I had a high enough science skill, I was able to take the sonic emitter from Loyal and use that to kill the ants. By now I have a high science, medicine, and a decent repair, so I was able to do pretty much all of their quests fairly easily, passing the skill checks to speed things along. The last thing I did was just cure all of Argyle's patients, and so the boomers were ready to send me to the bomber. Like I said, I have a high science skill, so I was able to get the rebreather from Jack, and that made things very easy for me, seeing as despite the lake lurks being, well, lake lurks, they can't actually hurt you while you're in the lake. As counterintuitive as this seems, it actually is true. Since the fishmen can't hurt me, raising the bomber was extraordinarily easy, so now I have control of a gang of explosive enthusiasts that are not me. From ambassador to assassin, my next task for the NCR was to go assassinate that idiot Pacer. Truth be told, this took me a lot longer than it probably should have, mainly because I was hell-bent on poisoning Pacer, and I've never actually done this before, so I had to figure out how to do it. It took me the better part of an hour to figure it out, but eventually I did find out what I had to do, and I spiked Pacer's jet and went and told him to go sit on the toilet. This of course kills Pacer, finishing the quest, but more importantly, when I went to go restock my dynamite at Mick and Ralph's, I was approached by the NCR radio man. I'm not sure what he was doing there, but he was sort of just waiting for me. Now up to this point, the main way I had gotten my dynamite was by either killing people or shopping. Now an issue started showing up where enemies stopped dropping dynamite because I was no longer in early game. They started replacing dynamite with things like frag grenades or grenade rifles. Now a sensible player would pick these up and replace the dynamite with them, but obviously I'm not sensible and cannot do that this run. Now I saved the NCRCF until this point because I figured it would be the mother lode when it came to dynamite. Sadly, I was very disappointed as I only made a net gain of a single piece of dynamite while I was there. For whatever reason, none of the powder gangers were holding dynamite, spare a few at the entrance. This ended up being a bigger waste than anything else, so I was extremely disappointed when it came to that. Now, in case you couldn't tell, raiding the powder gangers was kind of my big shot, as I was expecting it would get me so much dynamite that I'd be able to use it throughout the entire run. The problem is, obviously, that was a bit of a waste, so now I'm stuck with a pitiful amount of dynamite. It's at this point that I realized whatever I had left I had to use sparingly, seeing as I wasn't going to get much more throughout the rest of the run. Now, although I could continue the story and go straight to the Great Khans, I decided I would not do that yet, simply because I figured they weren't going to be the worst thing I'd encounter today, and rather that the Brotherhood of Steel was the biggest threat. To me, this just means that I'm going to go for them first before I kill the Khans. Now, although I could help the Brotherhood through their problems, I'm just going to be blowing them up because it's easier, and blowing people up is kind of my thing this run. When I got to Hidden Valley, I realized I forgot my key, but it's okay, the Brotherhood always leaves one under the mat, so I went and grabbed that and entered the bunker. Have I mentioned my high science skill yet? I was able to use that to reprogram the Brotherhood's turrets in order to attack them, making short work of everyone on the first floor. The best part about this was Elder McNamara was on the first floor as well, so he too was taken out by the turrets, meaning that I was saved at least one piece of dynamite. On the second floor, I had a lot more to think about since the Brotherhood was actively hunting me, and my main concern was I was going to run out of dynamite while in there. What ended up saving me was how grouped up the paladins inside the first room were, so I was able to use 2 dynamite to take both of them out. Next to go was Paladin Harden, as he has the next keycard, and he was surprisingly weak. Headscribe Tagger is obviously a pushover, so I killed him even faster than everyone else, and just snuck my way through the rest of the bunker. No one tried to stop me on my way out, seeing as they were already dead, so I made a quick getaway and was outside the bunker before it blew up. Now that the Brotherhood was a bit more than 6 feet under, I was definitely feeling a lot more comfortable with my dynamite supply. This was a false sense of comfort, however, as it turns out Red Rock was a bit of a nightmare. The issue wasn't the cons in the Longhouse, despite the fact they have better armor. A few well-placed pieces of dynamite was able to take them all out. The main problem, however, was the cons patrolling the outside, who patrolled the area in groups of 1 or 2, and I could not get to group up for the life of me. This meant there was a lot more wasted dynamite than that was necessary, and I ended up leaving the place with around 9 sticks of dynamite. What did I do with these 9 sticks of dynamite? Well, the first went to Mr. House, as I wanted to blow him up. I did turn in all my snow globes, however, even the one that's inside the Lucky 38, as I figured I'd need a good amount of caps for what I was going to do next. What I was going to do next was get a couple implants, mainly the defense implant as well as a regeneration one. After getting my plastic surgery, I ended up getting jump scared by Malcolm Holmes, but sadly he ran into the Mojave outpost, meaning that I couldn't actually blow him up, not without destroying my main supply of dynamite at any rate. Next up on the NCR's to-do list was the Omertas, and as much as I'd love to blow them all up, sadly I simply don't have the dynamite for that. Instead, I walked into the casino and refused to hand my weapons in, which made them so angry at me that they never let me back in. This fails the quest for the NCR, but it still technically lets me proceed through the story, so I'm okay with that. That was the last quest I had to do for the NCR, so now it's finally time to go through with the assassination. Well, I say assassination, but I've already done that. What I need to do is actually protect the president, which was a lot easier than I thought. Having a maxed out explosive skill meant that I got to take the bomb off the vertibird, and the sniper wasn't any trouble seeing as a single stick of dynamite was enough to kill him. All in all, things went really smoothly, and I don't really have much to say here, as I kinda just disarmed the bomb and then told Ranger Grant, which made the president leave. Now it's of course time for Hoover Dam. Before I go to the dam and start blowing up a bunch of legionaries though, I realized that I would need more dynamite if I want to do anything in the fight, so I went to each of my vendors and waited around until it would restock. Originally, I was just sitting outside the Mojave Outpost barracks because Lacey was the only vendor that was selling dynamite for the longest time, but by some stroke of good luck, the absolute champion of a being Mick happened to have 8 sticks of dynamite in his inventory. This was his secret inventory, mind you. But like some sort of cruel joke, the next time I entered Mick and Ralph's, it turns out Mick's inventory completely busted because he wouldn't restock either his secret inventory or his real inventory. Oddly enough, the next time I entered Mick and Ralph's, it seemed to set me back a couple recordings as yet another NCR ranger approached me in there. This was quite clearly a different ranger, seeing as they were wearing different clothes and were a different person altogether, but yes, it's kind of weird that the same thing happened twice. All in all, I was only able to get about 10 extra sticks of dynamite, which isn't a whole lot and most definitely won't carry me through the entirety of Hoover Dam. I wasn't too worried about taking out the legionaries on the outside, however, as the NCR doesn't kid around when it comes to backup. The troopers stationed in and around the dam are more than enough to take on the onslaught of the Legion, and by the time you get to the middle of the dam, you're going to be backed up by NCR veteran rangers. These are of course very powerful and can honestly take care of the Legion without me, so I was able to proceed without spending a single stick of dynamite. If the game is only going to let me have 20 sticks of powdered death, then by God, I'm going to make these sticks of dynamite count, so I entered the Legates camp swinging. The Praetorians were obviously the toughest thing I faced up to this point, and they took a whole 3 dynamite sticks to the shins in order to kill them. I did have the dynamite supplies to do this, but it ended up draining all but a couple of my dynamite sticks, and seeing as 4 dynamite isn't enough to take out the Legate, it would seem like I was in very big trouble. Luckily, I had planned for this and had been saving all of my long fuse dynamite up until this point, so I set it up in a little pile at the base of the Legate's camp and threw a powder charge on top of it. Now, as much as I want to say that the Legate tripped the powder charge, the dynamite all went off, and he got wiped off the face of the earth, I sadly can't. It turns out a surprising amount of things could go wrong when setting one of these dynamite traps, like the dynamite can roll down the slope and no longer be triggered by the powder charge. Or maybe the Legate would decide that in fact melee combat was not his thing and he should use grenades like me. By far the most infuriating thing that could happen was a piece of one of the NCR people that charges the Legate right at the beginning of the fight could fly off the person, land on the powder charge, set it off, and blow up the dynamite trap. This happened to me multiple times, and I was very fed up with it by this point. The recording where I actually killed the Legate was a little botched, as I ended up getting cold feet at the end, and tried to throw a dynamite at him just to see if I could set off the powder charge like that. It worked, but sadly it cost me my good footage, as I didn't really get a good shot of the Legate getting blown up. It's okay, because that technically took out the last hurdle of the game, so I kinda just hurled my last dynamite pieces at some random legionaries before approaching the gate, speaking to General Oliver, finishing the game, and proving yes, you can beat Fallout New Vegas with dynamite. When I originally came up with the concept for this challenge, I was expecting the dynamite's less than ideal damage and sort of self-destructive nature to be what would make this challenging. I never would have guessed that dynamite, the item that I usually have in droves in other playthroughs, would be in such shortage during this run. I guess it makes sense as I'm actually using it this run and it's not just sitting in my inventory, so I really should have saw this coming. Oh well, it was still a fun challenge anyways, and although I could have probably fixed the shopping bugs and stuff like that, it's always been a sort of unspoken rule of these challenges that I have to work around the bugs and glitches, as it's kind of part of the New Vegas experience. Regardless, that's the end of this challenge. If you did enjoy, please consider subscribing. Otherwise, I'll catch you in the next one.